Close your eyes. Actually, don't. You're watching a video, but imagine it anyway. It's around 2737 BCE in ancient China, and there's a man named Shen Nung, a mythical scholar-emperor credited with basically inventing agriculture, medicine, and apparently also good hygiene habits. Because according to legend, he had a personal rule that all his drinking water had to be boiled first, at a time when most people were just drinking straight from rivers and hoping for the best. One afternoon, he's resting under a tree while a servant boils water for him in an open pot, and a gentle wind picks up and drops a few leaves from the tree straight into the pot, because that's just what trees do when nobody's paying attention and nothing dramatic is supposed to be happening. Now, most people would fish the leaves out immediately and move on with their day, but Shen Nung, being a curious guy and possibly just bored out of his mind from being an emperor who apparently had servants doing literally everything for him, decides to drink it anyway, and instead of tasting like leaf-flavored disappointment, it's fragrant, faintly bitter, and weirdly energizing. And just like that, completely by accident, tea is born, which means one of the most beloved beverages on the planet, the thing keeping half the world caffeinated and calm at the same time, started because a guy couldn't be bothered to pour out slightly contaminated water. But before we go further, it's worth pausing on how much of this story is actually verifiable, because the honest answer is not much. Shen Nung himself is a legendary figure, not a confirmed historical person, sort of the ancient Chinese equivalent of a founding myth, similar to how Romulus and Remus supposedly founded Rome by being raised by a wolf, which statistically probably didn't happen exactly like that either. What we do know with much more confidence is that tea drinking in China has archaeological and textual roots going back at least 3,000 years, with actual physical evidence, like tea residue found in ancient tombs, confirming that people were drinking something very tea-like long before anyone was writing detailed histories about it. So the falling leaf story might be less a documentary and more the ancient version of a really good marketing legend, the kind of origin story every good product needs, and tea, it turns out, has had excellent marketing for over 2,000 years running. Now let's talk about the plant itself, because this is where the story stops being folklore and starts being genuinely fascinating botany. All tea, and I mean all of it, green, black, white, oolong, pu'er, whatever fancy tin your aunt has in her cupboard, comes from the exact same plant, Camellia sinensis, an evergreen shrub native to East Asia. There is no separate green tea plant and black tea plant. It's one species, and the difference between all these types comes down entirely to what happens to the leaves after they're picked, which is honestly a plot twist most tea drinkers go their whole lives without knowing. The moment a tea leaf is plucked, an enzyme inside it starts reacting with oxygen in a process called oxidation, the same basic chemical idea behind a cut apple turning brown, except instead of ruining your snack, this process transforms flavor, color, and caffeine profile entirely. Green tea is essentially the plant caught early, before oxidation gets going, using heat, either the traditional Chinese method of pan-firing the leaves in a hot wok, or the Japanese method of steaming them, to basically freeze the chemistry in place and lock in that fresh, grassy, slightly vegetal flavor. Let the same leaves oxidize longer and you get oolong. Let them oxidize almost completely and you get black tea, which means the tea aisle at your grocery store isn't 15 different plants, it's one plant wearing 15 different costumes depending on how long you let it sit around before you stop it, which is either beautiful or slightly unsettling depending on how you look at it. For centuries after its earliest documented use, tea in China wasn't the casual drink-it-at-your-desk beverage it is today. It started out firmly in the medicine cabinet, prescribed by ancient physicians for digestion, alertness, and general wellness, which means somewhere in history, tea's entire brand went from medical prescription to thing you drink while watching cooking videos at midnight, and nobody ever formally announced that transition. Buddhist monks played a massive role in tea's rise, using it to stay awake during extremely long meditation sessions, which honestly makes monks history's original caffeine-dependent night shift workers, sipping tea to survive hours of stillness the same way modern office workers survive hours of Zoom calls. By the time we reach the Tang Dynasty, somewhere around the 8th century CE, tea had gone fully mainstream across Chinese society, and this is when a scholar named Lu Yu wrote an entire dedicated book called the Cha Jing, or Classic of Tea, essentially becoming history's very first tea sommelier centuries before sommeliers were a job title anyone had thought of. Lu Yu had extremely strong, extremely specific opinions about water quality, about brewing temperature, about the shape of the ideal teacup, the kind of detailed, borderline obsessive commentary that modern tea influencers are still unknowingly recycling in their videos today. Except Lu Yu didn't have a ring light or a sponsorship deal, just an unreasonable amount of passion for correctly boiled water.
From China, tea's next big leap was to Japan, carried across the sea by Buddhist monks who had traveled to China to study and came home not just with religious teachings, but with tea seeds and tea culture tucked into their luggage like the world's most consequential souvenir. The Japanese didn't just adopt tea, they took the entire concept and ran a full marathon with it, eventually developing Chan-Oyu, the Japanese tea ceremony, an elaborate, precise, almost meditative ritual built around mindfulness, respect, and an intense appreciation for a beverage that most modern people microwave in under a minute while checking their phone. Matcha, the vivid green powdered tea central to that ceremony, is technically also green tea, just grown in shade to boost chlorophyll and amino acids, then stone ground into powder, meaning the ceremonial version of green tea takes an already deliberate process and adds even more deliberate steps on top of it, because apparently regular green tea just wasn't extra enough. Meanwhile, back in China, tea had become such a valuable commodity that it started functioning almost like currency in some regions, with compressed tea bricks literally used for trade along routes connecting China to Tibet and Central Asia, which means there was a stretch of history where you could plausibly pay for a horse using tea, a sentence that sounds made up but genuinely isn't. Eventually, tea made its way west, though that story takes a much darker turn once European trading companies get involved, with tea becoming one of the most heavily taxed, fought over, and eventually smuggled commodities in global trade, playing a direct role in events like the Opium Wars, and on a lighter historical note, a certain famous harbor incident in Boston that turned an entire ocean into the world's largest unwanted teapot. But green tea specifically stayed most closely associated with East Asia for a very long time, while Europe and later America developed a stronger appetite for black tea, partly because black tea's stronger oxidation made it far more stable for long ocean voyages, meaning green tea's more delicate, less processed nature that makes it so prized today is the exact same trait that made it commercially inconvenient for centuries of global shipping, which is a very ancient example of freshness and convenience being fundamentally at war with each other. Now, in the modern era, green tea has had something of a full-circle glow-up, going from a somewhat overlooked regional specialty in the West to a certified wellness celebrity, showing up in everything from weight loss supplements to skincare products to suspiciously green-colored ice cream, largely thanks to modern research into compounds called catechins, powerful antioxidants that are more concentrated in green tea specifically because it skips that heavy oxidation process that other teas go through. This doesn't mean green tea is some miracle cure, despite what roughly half the internet's wellness industry would like you to believe, but there is genuine, ongoing scientific interest in its health effects, which is a pretty remarkable outcome for a drink that, according to legend, started with an emperor being too lazy to strain his water properly. So the next time you're microwaving a mug of green tea in under a minute flat while scrolling through your phone with absolutely no ceremony whatsoever, completely unbothered by oxidation chemistry, dynasties, monks, or trade wars, just remember that the whole tangled, accidental, thousands of years long story boils down to a bored emperor, a distracted servant, an inconvenient breeze, and a plant that happened to be growing in exactly the wrong right place at exactly the right time, patiently waiting thousands of years for you to finally give it the 5 seconds of respect it clearly never got the first time around.